Bazow! Hello, everybody. Welcome to Knifewear Live, Friday afternoon. Getting goofy. Hello. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Today we are going to talk about butchery. We've got a big bag of chickens. We got some beef. We got some fish. This was a viewer recommendation live stream. About a month ago, we did some advanced knife skills. Getting into just like brunoise and trickier techniques with kitchen knives. Really trying to help the home cooks gain some more chefly knowledge. And so today, during that video, we had lots of people saying, "Hey, it'd be great if you could show us how to break down chicken or portion your own steak, stuff like that." And I thought, hey, that's not only a good skill to have, but it's also a really good way to save money on groceries. And I'm not even going to go into talking about groceries being expensive because we're all aware and I'd just be beating a dead horse. So instead, we're just going to get right into it. Today, we are going to show you 2 ways to break down a whole chicken. I like doing this myself, and I do it often because whole chicken is just so much cheaper. The dollar per pound is way lower, and you do obviously pay for the bones, but it still works out to be a lot better, and you get bones to make stock, so it's a win-win. So it does take a little bit of time. Obviously, all this stuff takes more time than just buying meat pre-portioned in a package, but I find there's often a bit less packaging, so that's a plus, and you are not paying for the labor of cutting the animal apart, which is where a good chunk of the expense comes from. Obviously, it comes from raising the animal, but it also comes from handling it, and the more times a human has to touch it, the more money it's going to cost. So even if you just have a little bit of extra time on the weekend or whenever, butchering your own meat is a really good way to not only save money, but to get a little more in touch with what you're eating. A lot of us, I think, grew up eating pre-portioned chicken breasts out of a package. And I saw this hilarious meme the other day where it's like my daughter just asked if the food chicken and the animal chicken were spelled the same way. She's in for a rude awakening. It's like, that's true because people don't realize like this food comes from an animal. So I know in my experience, learning to do this gives you more respect and understanding for the meat, helps you to be more proactive with it, to waste less, to treat it with care, to cook it properly. And it's fun. I really enjoy this. I think at the end of the day, if you don't find butchery fun, it's probably not worth the time or the money that you're going to save. But if you enjoy things like this, if you enjoy these little hobby kind of tasks in the kitchen, I think you'll have a lot of fun with it. So yeah, we'll get into cutting chicken, 2 different ways that I like to do. We have a spare chicken if anybody has follow-ups or wants to learn anything else later on. We are going to get into cutting up some beef, how to portion your own steaks. It's pretty straightforward, but I'll try to give you some tips, and as well as maybe some tips for trimming up beef if you're trying to get rid of like sinew and stuff that you don't want to eat. And then lastly, we've got a lake trout. We found some really inexpensive lake trout at Superstore yesterday, so we're going to cut that guy up as well. And in the meantime, if you have questions, we'll probably try to stop between each section and have some time for Q&A. If you have questions that pertain to what I'm doing while I'm doing it, we'll try to answer those as they come up. But we'll try to answer everybody's questions today, and hopefully you learn a thing or two.
One of our viewers, Garrett, says, I work professionally in a meat department.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah.
Well, you can roast me in the comments. I give you full permission.
He's curious about your knife choice and what you're going to use.
That's the first thing I'm going to talk about. Yeah, so let me preface this by saying I worked in restaurants for about 8 years before coming to Knifewear. So I'm kind of equal parts cook and knife guy. Food is really my passion, but I've never worked as a butcher professionally. Most of the meat cutting I've done has either been in school. That's where I learned originally how to cut apart chickens and stuff like that. And then I've done a lot of it at home. I cut up a whole chicken probably about once a week. I do fish in the summer as I catch them. I do larger stuff less often, but I have some familiarity with it. I've purchased a half pig and broken it down myself. And so if you are a professional, my work will probably look a bit sloppy, but if you're a home cook, this is more than good enough for you. Today I'm going to be using 4 different knives. Obviously all knives that we sell, I think everybody knows by now we work at Knifewear, and so we specialize in selling knives, particularly Japanese ones, but some other stuff as well. Yeah, I'm going to be using 2 boning knives and then 2 other knives. So are we top down now?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Gotta have some coffee. I'm getting the afternoon sleepies. First up, we are going to use a Honesuki, or Honesuki as some people say. This guy is a Japanese poultry knife. You don't see European style butchery knives traditionally in Japan. They're a bit of a newer phenomenon. So, somewhat historically, this is more of the shape that would have been used for cutting apart poultry for things like yakitori. Basically, because Japanese steel is a lot harder, they don't hammer it out super thin and make it flexible the way the European knives are. Instead, it's got quite a thick spine in order to make the knife more durable, and that thickness continues up along the edge to the heel of the knife here. The area called the choil, where your finger would rest against it for a chef's knife. So this back here is quite thick. The knife sweeps up with a little bit of a curve into this point. Some of them are more triangular shaped. This is the Fujimoto hammer tone, and it looks a little more like a kobunka, but they're all a little different. Some of them have slightly taller bevels like this guy and are a little on the thinner side. Some of them have shorter bevels and are a little on the thicker side. It's just personal preference, but I really wanted to give this guy a spin today. So this is maybe a little more delicate than some of the Honesukis out there, but it's a beautiful blade. It's a relatively rugged steel compared to some other Japanese knives. What I like most about the Honesuki is that it's a little thicker on the back half here. So if you are going through some small rib bones or cartilage on a chicken, it's going to stand up to that. But the front end is a little thinner, a little more precise, a little more like a scalpel. It's like equal parts axe and scalpel, or cleaver and scalpel, which I really like. So I've used this guy a lot before, but I'll get to show you today why it's so awesome. I'm also going to be using something that's more of a traditional European style boning knife or Western style boning knife. This is from Silverthorn Knives in the United States, and I want to say North Carolina. Yeah, North Carolina. So it's got a little more of that skinny swept up blade that you would expect from a European boning knife. Little, even more sweet maybe than like a Henkel's boning knife would have. It's also flexible, which you don't see in Japan that often. We do carry some flexible Japanese boning knives, but I figured I would try something that's not Japanese just for comparison's sake. This guy is made from a BD1 carpenter steel, so it's a similar hardness to Japanese knives, maybe a touch softer. That's going to make it, I would say, a little better around bones. And if I were breaking apart something larger, like a half pig, for example, this is the knife I'd probably use. We're going to see how it works for the chicken and the trimming today. Then I've got a Japanese slicing knife. This is a Sujihiki. This is basically a carving knife. Really long, skinny, sharpened on both sides, double bevel. It's basically, you know, you picture your uncle or your grandfather's carving knife. This is the fancy Japanese version of that. Generally, when you are making really long, clean cuts like carving roasts or portioning steaks, a long, skinny blade is a little better for that because you get less surface area contact, and because it's long, you're not sawing back and forth. You're just getting a clean cut. And then lastly, a cleaver. I think we all know by now Japanese knives should not be used through bones. Some people say they shouldn't be used around bones, but I wholeheartedly disagree. I do that all the time, and they're fine as long as you're careful. And so if we want to actually chop through a bone, we're going to use a cleaver. And I've used this guy on chickens, rabbits, even pig bones, and for smaller ones it works really well. Arcos makes some larger cleavers too that are better for larger bones. But this guy's really great for home use. We get a lot of people who get whole raw bones for their dogs and want something to chop them up. And so I often recommend this one because it's a good manageable home size. Awesome. Questions before we get into it?
Not so far, just a little bit. Somebody
Great.
thought this was the other stream.
Oh, the rare knife raffle. Yeah, if you want to, you can go watch that later. We did draw the names for the rare knife raffle. If you didn't get an email and you don't have one in your junk mail, then you probably didn't win. But if anybody doesn't claim their knife before Monday, we will draw another round of names. So we'll see. Yeah, and congrats to all the winners. So yeah, we got our knives picked out now. I guess other gear you might want to have is a ceramic honing rod. I don't have one handy, but it's a great tool for keeping your knife sharp. If you are doing a lot of butchery, you might want to hone your knife partway through because you are running into bones and skin and things that dull blades quickly. Today, I don't think I'm going to need it, so I won't worry about it too much. Oh yeah, and before we get into it, got a couple pieces of news as well. we just booked a second date for our brisket smoking class. So if you're in Calgary, Alberta, we have partnered with Prairie Dog Brewing, just right by our warehouse actually, and they're awesome folks who have the largest smoker in Western Canada, if not Canada. And so basically, there's 10 spots in the class. It's 375 Canadian dollars, but you get a Sakai Takayuki 300mm slicing knife. You get an entire smoked brisket. You get several hours of instruction. You get lunch. You get a beer. So it's a really good deal. And yeah, we sold out the first class in like 2 days. There's more dates available now. There's a link in the description if you are in Calgary, Alberta, and you want to book into that class. It's gonna be really fun. We also got some new chef spoons from Ume Shiso. They're up on the website and showing up in stores right now. So those are pretty cool. Yeah, awesome. Let's get into it. Let's cut open a chicken. So we're gonna use the Honesuki today. And I like this knife because when I am butchering smaller stuff like chicken and fish, I prefer a longer, or a more rigid blade as opposed to like a flexible blade like we use in the West. And I just find it works better. I am cutting on my wooden large cutting board today. I do this often and it's never been an issue. Some people are uncomfortable cutting meat on a wooden board, and that's fine. If you are, just get a little plastic board to put over top. I'm also going to use a Hasegawa board as well, but this guy's quite nice, and if you wash it with soap and water, it's not an issue. So I am going to cut chicken on it today. The main rule I follow when I'm doing butchery, especially when I'm just doing some quick small stuff, and something like chicken where you can get salmonella, that sort of thing, is I keep one hand as my chicken hand. So that can be all gross as much as it needs to be, but I keep my knife hand clean. I try not to touch the chicken with this hand, so that if I need to go grab a drink of water, take a call, stop my daughter from eating cat food, I can do any of those things one-handed and we'll be good to go. Or if I need to grab a container to put, the meat into. The other thing I like to do that I almost forgot was I like to take off my rings. If you have jewelry on your hands, it's gonna get gross and you gotta get in there and wash it out. So instead, just take it off, put it on the counter, and then you're good to go. So this guy, as I'm cutting apart this chicken, I'm going to use the front end of the blade for most of the work. Really, I use the front half for most of it, but if I ever need to go through a bone, I'm going to use the heel for that. And I'm gonna take a chicken apart 2 ways. The first way is gonna be bone in for making fried chicken. Pretty traditional, what's called an 8 cut or a 10 cut. Yeah, that's kind of it. So let's get into a little chicken anatomy here, I guess. So here's our chicken. Normally he would stand up like this, right? So feet would be attached here. This is the leg on either side, right? These guys are the wings, which if it could fly, it would fly with. The head's attached up here. This is the breast here. So we're gonna go in and we're gonna basically take the legs off first, and then we're gonna remove the breast with the wing attached. Again, this is often traditional for French cuisine or for fried chicken. And it's a little bit more of a pain in the ass, so you'll probably find the second way you prefer, but let's do it this way and see what you think. So first off, we're gonna separate the skin that attaches the breast to the leg, right? There's just this membrane here. We're gonna cut it on either side. And so I just kind of draw the knife across it, nice and gently. If your knife is sharp, you need very little force. I've got that separated out. And now you can see a little more into like the cavity area. You can see in the thigh where the joint is in here. And you can see kind of the structure of the leg. You've got a knee up here, leg bends like that. And you've got lots of delicious fat and skin in there and stuff. So we've got our skin detached. We're gonna flip the chicken over. And we're just gonna notice, we're gonna take a sec to look at it. So you got the spine here, and you can almost see like a little cross or a T there, where there's the line of the spine, and then there's this line that separates the torso from the waist. It's basically the waist of the chicken. And so right underneath that line, you got these 2 little nuggets here. Those are the oysters. Those are basically like, probably like the butt of the chicken, or the hip joints or the hip muscles. But those are what we're gonna aim for because we wanna make sure we take those with us. So I like to draw my knife straight across the back here and just make a clean cut to separate out the top and the bottom half of the chicken. Then with my left hand, I'm going to feel around, and I'm going to feel where that thigh bone comes up and kind of stops and attaches to the spine there. That is the thigh joint. And so what we want to do is we want to pop that out and dislocate it. So we're just going to push in with our thumb and bend the leg backwards. And if we look on the other side there, you can see where that top of the thigh bone there, where the marrow is, that's fully popped out of the joint now. So we can take the tip of the Honesuki, and I like to pull. For me, when I'm butchering, it's like half pulling and half cutting. So I'm going to pull the meat away from the bone. I'm going to take the very tip, and I'm going to make a little incision just in the bottom of the oyster there. And there's like a little cup-shaped bone that it's sitting in. So we're just going to separate that guy out until it starts to come loose, and then we're going to cut on the right side of it just to separate it a little bit. And we're just going to get in with our fingers and start pulling it backwards so that we don't leave it behind. There we go. And now the oyster's detached. So we're going to get in here with our knife where the thigh joint is. And so basically we can cut straight across horizontally, but we don't want to cut all the way through because then we'll leave a bunch of thigh meat behind. So we're just going to cut across that joint. We're going to feel a little resistance where we cut into the cartilage. And now we've got the joint, the hip joint totally detached there. Then, like I said, we're not going to cut straight across because we're going to leave all this nice thigh meat behind. So instead we're going to follow down along this tailbone, and that's where we're going to separate out the rest of the meat. So I just kind of slide my knife forward and back in a gentle sawing motion, pressing down with my thumb so that I'm riding along that tailbone. And then we got one leg separated off. And if there's a little bit of bone or a little bit of cartilage left behind on the thigh, you can just pick that off or trim that off. It's better to leave a little bit of bone on here and have to trim it off than to leave meat on here. And then we do the same thing on the other side. So again, I'll show you from the front side this time. We're going to put our finger in where the hip joint of the chicken is. We're going to pull the knee back and we're going to dislocate. And if I need to apply pressure to keep the chicken down, I just carefully do that with the spine of my knife instead of touching the chicken. There we go. Detached. This guy's making the gross face. This guy doesn't like this stuff very much.
I just feel bad for the chicken.
That's fair.
I took a Honesuki class. I was like getting ready to like maybe try to teach it, and I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I feel bad about this.
That's something I meant to say at the beginning. If this makes you grossed out or squeamish, and you do it once and you still feel grossed out and squeamish, you're probably not going to enjoy it. And it's probably worth just paying more money to have somebody cut the chicken apart for you. There is no shame in that. I love doing this stuff myself, and I think it's a skill everybody should learn, but it's not a skill everybody's going to use, and that's fine. So next, we got the oyster there. So again, we don't want to leave the oyster behind. It's a nice piece of meat. It's many people's favorite part of the chicken. So we're going to find kind of visually where the oyster connects to the bone. If you're ever unsure, just poke around with your finger, right? Just feel the chicken because it's going to be pretty obvious what's bone and what's muscle. So we're going to find that dividing line, and we're just going to get in there with the tip of our knife. And it's all about small cuts and pulling. Small cut, pull away. Small cut, pull away. Small cut, pull away. So the oyster's out. You can see really obviously there, that's the oyster. That's where the oyster hangs out. Left a tiny bit behind there. And then we're just going to come down towards the tailbone. So again, very light amount of pressure with my thumb on the top of the knife. Just cutting. Make sure your left hand isn't in the way of the blade. That's very important. And then I'm just going to cut down towards the cutting board. So I separate out all that meat. And voila. We have 2 bone-in legs. And then we have a breast on the cavity here. And sometimes you can even roast, if you want roast chicken breast, you can roast it like this on the bone, and it protects it from drying out. And you could just do it right like this because it stands up nicely, and then you get air circulation underneath, so it cooks really evenly. But we're going to take that off the bone in a sec. Okay, now we have a leg, so it's more obvious now. The shape of the leg, we have thigh bone, 90-degree angle, and we have the leg bone, right? So drumstick, thigh, drumstick, thigh. So we're going to go in and we're going to separate these, and the easiest way to do this is from the meat side as opposed to the skin side. And you can feel around again, and you want to feel that kind of bulbous cartilagey joint. You can also use a visual guide. Conveniently, the chicken has drawn lines on himself of where you're supposed to cut. So you find that fat line that separates the knee from the thigh, the two muscle groups, and you just put your knife slightly to the right of it, and you just slide right through. And because I'm cutting through cartilage and marrow, but not really like hard bone, you'll notice I didn't actually use the heel of the knife. You can kind of put the tip down and then push through with the heel, but I find I get more precision with the front end of the knife. And if the knife stops, see, like say if I cut like to the right instead of to the left, and I hit the bone, I can feel, and my knife stops. It's not going anywhere. So then I can pull my knife out instead of forcing it through, and then I can go right through the cartilage. Nice and easy, right? You're gonna chip your knife not necessarily by hitting bone, but by forcing it through bone or by twisting it if you hit bone. If you're like ham-fisting your way through this chicken, you're gonna chip your knife when you hit the bone. But if you're taking your time and doing it gently, which you should be, you're not gonna chip it if you gently run into the bone. So don't be too afraid.
We're getting tons of oyster love.
Oyster love, woo! Be like a good R&B singer's name, Oyster Love. I feel like that'd be Mike's R&B name. Yeah, the oyster is great. It's really nice on a roast chicken because it holds onto a lot of the moisture. The general rule of thumb with animals is the more work the muscle does, the more flavor it has, but the tougher it is. And the less work the muscle does, the more tender it is, but the less flavor it has. So that's why chicken breast is pretty inoffensive, but you know, and it's fairly tender if you cook it properly. Whereas the legs aren't everybody's favorite, but I think they're way better because they have way more flavor. Yeah. The trick is to marry somebody who prefers the other part of the chicken, and then you're always happy. Okay, so we could take this breast right off of the bone, but we're going to do something that's a little more old school, and I haven't done for a while, but I think I remember how to do it. So we're going to look inside the cavity here. We're going to have another chicken anatomy lesson. So we're just going to open it up a bit. And so you've got the spinal column here. Goes in a straight line, straight down. At least if the chicken's been to the chiropractor, it does. And then we've got the rib cage, basically in this area here, that forms the chest cavity. And then we have the keel bone, which is this kind of cartilagey coated bone that comes along the breast in the shape of a ship's keel, which is where the name comes from. And that you can actually see that popping out right here. So what we want to do is we want to separate out the back half, and then we're going to just cut that out and then split the chicken in half. So we're going to come down with our Honesuki, and we're going to we're going to find basically the rib bones kind of connect to each other here, and there should be a bit of cartilage in there. So we're going to separate out this meat here, this sinew that's in the way, and then we're just going to cut. Again, I'm going to use the tip of the knife. You could use the heel, but it's kind of awkward. So I'm going to use the front end of the knife, but I'm going to cut very carefully through that cartilage. And if the bone's fine, like these rib bones, the Honesuki can go through that as well. I'm just going to cut through those. I'm just going to do that on either side so I can open up this chest cavity a little more. And you'll see how easily that knife goes through because I'm not actually cutting bone there. Now again, if we cut straight down, we're going to run into some meat. We're going to leave some meat behind. So we want to open this guy up a little more. And you can kind of see through to where the wing is, the drumstick back here. So we don't want to cut straight down because we're going to run into that drumstick. So we're going to separate out, and then we're just going to cut to the left, angle the knife and cut to the left a little bit. And at a certain point, you're going to find where the wishbone and the drumstick attach to the spine. And so we just want to carefully guide our knife through. And if you're having trouble finding it, you can always flip the knife over, or flip the chicken over and come at it from the back. So you can see if we just open it up a little bit here, we're just cutting between the spine and the drumstick. And again, poke your finger in to feel around if you're not sure where things are. Find that cartilage and just gently push through it. If you're not confident, use the heel of the blade. But if we found the cartilage effectively, the knife's going to go through quite easily. And then there's just a little bit of skin left. And then we separate that out. Easy peasy. Then we do the same thing on the other side. We just carefully guide our knife in and away from the drumstick so that we don't leave him behind. Come at it from the back. Feel in with our thumb and forefinger to feel where the cartilage is. And you'll actually feel the connecting bone kind of come up in a V shape and then come back down with the drumstick. So we're just going to cut basically right in the point of that V. And again, if like I hit bone there for a sec, so I just stop, move my knife over slightly, and keep going. Try again. And then, yeah, just separate any remaining skin. There we go. So now we got the chicken spine. This is super good for stocks and soups. So don't throw this away. Save this, make some stock out of it. Can you pass me just like that blue bowl? That'll be my bone bowl. Bone bowl. Okay. So now we have a chicken breast, right? Trim this guy up a little bit. We have a chicken breast. It's beautiful, heart shape. You can cook it like that for Valentine's Day if you wanted. And then on the back side, we've still got the wings attached, which is great. And we've got, right there is that keel bone. So we're just gonna basically cut right through here. This is where the heel of the Honesuki is really gonna come in handy. So we're gonna inch our hand back the handle a little bit so we're not running our right hand into chicken. And we're just gonna kind of cut right down to the middle of that. And you can hear that kind of crack through. We're just gonna get it down to where it's right on that keel bone. And then gently press it through. I'm kind of like rocking a little bit, I guess. And then once we're most of the way through, we should just be able to draw the knife through like so. There you go. So now we have two chicken breasts. That's the keel bone split in half there. So you can see you've got the nice breast muscle there. We've got a little bit of bone on the back side of the breast here. And now I know a lot of people like their chicken breast skinless, or boneless, sorry. But if we are deep frying it or roasting it, and we don't want it to cook unevenly, we don't want it to dry out, this bit of bone kind of just acts as a bit of an insulator, and it's going to help keep some moisture in there so the breast isn't getting dried out from both sides. The skin on one side kind of helps keep it moisturized on that side. On the other side, you've got that bone structure protecting it. And then, yeah, and there we go. Easy peasy, right? And if I were roasting them for an entree, I would leave this whole. I would probably even just tuck this wing tip in, like so, just so it's not going to get burned in the roasting pan. You could also French it, which is basically you cut this wing off, and then you scrape all the meat off the drumstick, and it's really dumb, and I hate it, so I'm not going to do that. No offense if you're a traditional French cook, but it doesn't make any sense to me. So we're not going to do that. But if you want to do fried chicken, you're not going to deep fry an entire breast like that because it's going to be insane and probably kind of dry. So we are going to basically break this in half. And so we're just going to pull the meat back a little bit so we can see this bone. What we don't want to do is put our Honesuki through this bone here because that's where we could chip the knife, right? This guy's pretty solid. And so I'm going to find the cartilage where the wing attaches to the breast. And I'm going to come in and just separate that out carefully without cutting into the breast too much. There's a bit of a tendon in there. Kind of gets in the way. Boop. There we go. Just loosen that guy up a bit. You can see where that knuckle is detached. And then I like to just get this guy out of the way and then kind of cut in at an angle so that we leave a piece of breast that's not too thick, that'll cook pretty quickly. And so I'm going to cut like so. And then I've got a wing with a bit of breast attached, which we can deep fry, and then a bigger piece of breast with skin attached. I think people do it a little bit differently, but that's how I do it, because then you've got that nice bone structure on the back there. Yeah. Awesome. So that's way number one. That's if I was making fried chicken. I'll be honest, when I make fried chicken at home, I don't do it this old school way. I take all of the bones out, except for the bone on the wing. And I prefer prefer it that way, and my spouse prefers the chicken breast with no bones, and so that's what we do. But if you want to try it a little more of an old-fashioned way, or you want to leave a little more moisture in that meat and just protect it a bit, then that's a great way to do it. Yay!
There's a lot of French hate in the comments.
A lot of French hate. Woo! I always joke that my family's English, Scottish, and French, so I'm genetically predisposed to hating myself. You know what? So I went to cooking school. I'm just gonna banter a bit and we'll answer some questions while I clean up and de-chicken. I went to traditional French techniques, less so than like some of the other guys that work here, like Mike and Lordy and Kevin, because by the time I went, things were starting to modernize a bit, and a lot of the really old school stuff was being not necessarily ditched, but questioned whether it was necessary to teach or not. Some of it's really valuable and really cool. Some of it is really silly and, you know, not necessarily the most progressive way to do things. So I have no problem trash talking traditional French techniques that don't make any sense. If you watched our advanced knife skills video a month ago, a few people requested that I do some turned vegetables, so I was more than happy to oblige, but I also, as I was doing it, explained why it's super silly and I will never do it that way. And if I, God forbid, go crazy and decide to open my own restaurant, we would never do that. Yeah. What don't people like that's French?
Garrett just said, I feel the disdain for more uselessly fancy French techniques.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, uselessly fancy is a good way to put it. Like there's some, there's one dish called a veal blanquette, and maybe somebody can tell me why I'm wrong, but it basically, it's a dish that's all white, like it's veal and it's, you know, pearl onions and a bechamel sauce and stuff, but you don't brown any of the meat, which to me is just silly. Like, why wouldn't you brown meat? It tastes better that way. Who knows? The whole point was to make it white, but it's a velouté. Well, I never made it, Mike, so I wouldn't know. I've eaten it. I just didn't make it because I wanted to brown the meat.
Mr. Jake asked, is he doing another chicken for us slow people?
Yeah. So you can go back. This video will stay up. You can go back and rewatch that. I have 3 chickens today, so I'll do two different ways, and then I can do the third one again later on a different way or whatever. If you want to see how to spatchcock it, I can do that poorly. Yeah, I'll do that. And then, yeah, but we have other videos too. Yeah, so Lordy did that exact cut, that exact technique. We've got a video, I think it's called 2 Ways to Debone Chicken or something like that, from last year, and it goes over that in detail as well. Awesome. Any other questions? So yeah, the Honesuki is really handy. It does an excellent job, nice and tough. We don't usually describe Japanese knives as tough or durable, but you saw me cutting through small bones, and Carlos was there with no issues. And the edge hasn't complained because I took my time and I went slowly, and if I ran into a bone, I stopped and came back.
Mr. Mike asked if there would be a discount for live viewers on the Honusukis.
Oh!
I was like, for you, $1.
Yeah. No, yeah, I mean, if there's one you want to buy, we could, yeah, I'm sure we could give you 10% off. Why not? As a reward for tuning in live. What are you looking at, Nolan? Okay. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, awesome. Cool. Well, chicken number 2. I don't know why I washed my cutting board because I'm doing a chicken again. Chicken number 2. We are going to use a Silverthorn knife. We're going to do this guy totally boneless. If I'm braising chicken or I'm frying it, I like to leave the bone in. But obviously, if you're making a stir fry or you know, yakitori, you're skewering it, souvlaki, anything like that, you're probably going to debone and dice it up. So that's what we're going to do. So again, we got the chicken anatomy. We're going to do this similarly, but I'm going to do the order differently. I like to take the breast off first because if you take the legs off first and then you try to debone the breast, it's very unstable and it's wiggling around and it's kind of difficult. So that's going to be the main difference. Yeah, we'll get into it. So the first thing I'm going to do here is actually changing it right from the get-go is I'm going to take the wings off just to get them out of the way. So I come in with the tip of the knife, basically right behind where this wing attaches to the backbone there, and just make a cut, not too deep, just right to the cartilage there, because we don't want to cut into the breast meat here. Then we're going to come at it from the other side, or sorry, from the side, from the right, and I just carefully work through that cartilage. Again, not too much force, because we don't want the knife to shoot off and take off part of the breast. And then, again, pulling the meat back as I go, just working through that connective tissue. And then, again, instead of cutting straight down and taking some of the breast off with it, I'm going to scoop and just take off the wing there. And that is your first chicken wing. And then I come around, flip the chicken around. Again, come in from the spine side, find that joint. Again, poking, feeling kind of my whole way through. If you need to know where to cut, you can often look for the line where the two muscle groups separate. So there's like sort of an indent between the breast and the wing here. So we're going to cut that guy. And then, yeah, basically we're just trying to find that joint and separate out the connective tissue. And then, again, try not to remove any of the breast with it. There we go, we got 2 chicken wings. If you don't like to do your chicken wings whole like this, you can break them down as we kind of have them in the West. So basically what we're doing here is we're looking for the cartilage, that little knobbly knuckle bit, and we're trying to cut that. So on the chicken, we've got 2 knuckles. We got one here. It's a little bit deceptive. It's slightly off to the side, but it's between the drumstick and the wingette. And then we've got the wing tip there. So I like to squeeze it because that extends the wingette out. We're going to find that joint and just slide the knife through. And then with the drumstick, if you try to cut right on that joint, you're going to run into a bit of bone. So I just move it slightly to the right. And there we go. Then we have chicken wings for dinner. Yum, yum. Separate out that wing tip, slightly to the right of the joint, cut through. Easy peasy. These wing tips are really good for your stock pot. They got lots of good connective tissue and stuff that makes for good stock. Flavor. Okay, now we got breast, legs. We're going to separate the two. We're going to do that cut again in the V shape on either side of the breast to separate the skin between the 2 parts of the chicken. And then we're going to get in, we are going to feel for the keel bone, which is that piece that we split before. That guy runs straight down between the 2 sides of the breast. So we are going to put our knife just slightly to one side, and we're just going to draw it straight down carefully. And the knife is going to naturally veer off to one side of the breast. So it went to the left. So we're going to get our finger in and kind of open up that cut a little bit. And then we're going to find the wishbone, because that guy is going to be attached. It kind of comes up in a V shape along the collar here. If you look at the top of the chicken, this is the neck hole, for lack of a better term. So you call it a throat.
Yes, the neck.
Sorry guys, it's Friday. I've been writing all week. My brain's tired. So we've got the wishbone that comes down in a V shape like this. So there's a couple ways you can go about this, but what I'm going to do, I'm just going to remove this piece of skin up here to open that up. And then you might actually be able to see, you can sort of see a V shape in there. So I'm going to take the tip of my knife, I'm going to put it just behind the wishbone, just so it's not going to run into it. And I take the tip of the knife, I'm going to cut straight down until I hit bone, and then I'm just going to drag it back. And so that's just starting to separate that breast muscle away from the breastplate there. Like so, and that's what it should look like. And then the breastplate kind of veers off to one side. It kind of curves downwards in a round shape. If this is a duck, it actually goes straight off to the side. So we're just going to angle our knife at a diagonal, and we're going to take the tip, and we're just going to carefully slice, applying a bit of pressure in towards the bone side so that the knife rides along the bone and doesn't leave behind too much meat. There's a tiny scrap there that I left, but that's okay. That's just good stock. And there we go. And don't cut too far down because you're going to start to run into the thigh. So now we've got the breast mostly detached. It's kind of just hanging on there. So we're going to flip this guy around. By this point, the wishbone should have exposed itself. It's going to be right here, kind of sticking out from the breast, because it actually goes through the breast meat a little bit. And so we want to be careful here to remove it so that we don't butcher our breast. And so I'll try to angle this up a bit. And so there's the wishbone. You can kind of tap it to hear it. And there's the breast. So just going to take the knife, tip of the knife, gently guide it along. Again, pressing towards the bone ever so slightly. And we just want to separate and let that breast fall away from the bone. There we go. And that's it. Like, it falls away pretty much on its own. It's a little fragment. The wishbone's actually broken on this guy. Hopefully that's good luck. So we're just going to cut that away with the tip of the knife. Now the breast is just hanging on by a thread. There's just a little bit of bone it's attached to there. So we're just going to take the tip of the knife once again, just poke around and kind of find where the bone stops and the meat starts, and just cut right in the middle there. And then really there's no trick here. It's just a matter of finding the connective tissue that's keeping it held on and then cutting the skin. Whoop. And then we have a nice skin on chicken breast, which is how I like it. And there's a little bit of extra skin up here. Skin's delicious, but in this case, we're just going to pull it off so it doesn't burn. That guy can go in your stock pot as well. The skin's really good for the stock. And there we go. Voila. On the back end here, you have the chicken tender. Everybody loves tendies. This guy is kind of attached by a thread, but we're just going to leave him on. Depending on your application, you may or may not want to remove it, but I leave it behind. And there we go. So we're just going to do the same thing on the other side. It's a little trickier now. The chicken's going to be leaning over a little bit. Because you can see the wishbone at this point, I actually go in and take that guy out first now. So I find, basically use the other side of the wishbone as my guide, and I can feel in with my thumb a bit to feel where it's hiding right under the flesh there. I'm just going to carefully cut in with my knife. Really small cuts, just so I'm not hacking at the thing. Just trying to press into that bone with the tip of the knife. And then once you cut deep enough that you can kind of see the wishbone, you can almost fish it out if you're careful. Or if you want to be a caveman, you can just get in there with your fingers and kind of pull it out. The Tyler move, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so it's the wishbone's a weird shape. It's kind of the hardest part of this process. But basically, that's what you're going after. And you can see I left a little bit of meat in there. If you're roasting a whole turkey and you're going to carve it table side, you can go in and remove this guy when the turkey's raw. The wishbone's way bigger, but if you pull it out ahead of time, it makes the breast a lot easier to carve, because otherwise you're going to be running into it as you're carving. Okay, so now we can see the keel bone, and we can kind of see the structure of the breast now. So we got the keel bone here. We've got this, I'm not sure what that would be called, but that's kind of like in the sternum. We've got the bone that comes up and connects to the wing. We've got the rib cage over here. So that's what we're working with on the other side. We're going to cut right along the side of the keel bone there, very carefully, because we don't want to, there's meat hiding underneath here that we don't want to take off or leave behind. So we're just going to cut to separate that a bit. We're going to get in with our finger, open it up a little bit, and then pressing against the keel bone with the side of the knife once again. Just going to separate that out. And then I like to get in, because the keel bone kind of dips in here. It's like a hook, and just scoop out that tiny little bit of meat there, just so that's not left behind either. And then same as before, we're just sweeping with the tip of the knife. You can have it with the breast to the left or the right, whichever way is comfortable to you. I tend to move the chicken around a lot, so I'm always cutting a similar way. But we're just cutting outwards and downwards. And my hand's on the other side holding the chicken, but I make sure that my fingers that are on the other side of the meat are never in the way, never in the path of the knife, because it's very easy to cut yourself doing this, and that's not a good time. Boning knives are sharp, so be careful. Yeah, just cutting down along that rib cage. There we go. And that's most of the meat gone, so we're just going to find the skin that's leaving it connected and separate that out. All right, Sky, how badly am I getting roasted in the comments?
No, there's a lot of love. We've got a couple of questions.
Sweet.
Shoot. One of our favorite viewers, Spoon Monkey, asked, "What's the best sauce for chicken with
Spoon Monkey.
the least amount of ingredients and effort?"
Oh, least amount of ingredients and effort. Oh, that's okay. That's that's good. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. A little teriyaki glaze, pretty awesome.
Just a pan sauce is good too, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, so yeah, whatever. I don't know how you do your pan sauce. I usually would like deglaze whatever brown stuff is in the pan with a little wine or cider, and then I don't know, garlic, chilies, herbs. Yeah, just shit out of your spice drawer basically. Maybe finish it up with a little butter if you're feeling fancy. Fewest number of ingredients. Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to go wrong with just butter. You know, chimichurri is not that complex. Like, you do, what? Onion, parsley, something spicy, some garlic, olive oil, and red wine vinegar. Or lemon juice. Those would all be really good. Yeah.
Don Penny appreciates the butchery and trimming videos.
Awesome. Thanks, Don. Oh, you know what? Easy sauce. Reduce chicken stock. Like, deglaze your pan, just reduce chicken stock. And that's it. Like, just reduce it down until it's thick. Finish it with a bit of cold butter if you want to thicken it up a little more, make it a little more rich. But it's like one ingredient.
Got that southern, like, chicken gravy vibes.
Yeah.
I miss that. Mike bought the Fujimoto Honesuki.
Oh, nice.
Congrats.
Fujimoto hammer tone?
Hammer tone, yeah.
Yeah,
the one you're
nice.
using.
Oh, I love that knife. Yeah, it's a beautiful knife. Nice, comfortable handle, which is important.
Yeah, a lot of people are loving your techniques. Garrett was complimenting you.
Oh, thanks.
He says, "I can't count the number of times I've been handed packs of chicken wings to separate the flat and the drum and remove the tips. Absolutely nailed it."
Yeah, yeah, no kidding. It's a fun job until you have to do like 5,000 of them.
And Jake says you're doing an excellent job.
Oh, thank you, Jake. Okay, so now we have this barren rib cage up top, and we have the legs still attached, right? So we're gonna flip her over. We're gonna do a cut. I like to do a cut straight across just to separate out those oysters. This is more of a visual guide than anything, I think. It's just the easiest way to do it. Straight cut, easy for an amateur. We're gonna find that joint again, right? Where the thigh bone comes up along here and then it stops suddenly. And we're just gonna press down and pull the knee back and pop that out. We're gonna get the tip of our knife. We're gonna find that oyster and pull it away from the bone. And we're just gonna gently scoop in there with the tip. Like so. Following the bone. Slight pressure downwards that the knife is riding along the bone there. And then up a little bit. It goes like a roller coaster, like woo, like that. So we're gonna go down, and then we're gonna come up around the hip joint, and then we're gonna come back down again. Again, slight pressure downwards with my thumb so that the knife just follows the bone, and I don't have to do very much work. And then sometimes there's a little like flange out here of bone and cartilage. So sometimes that guy can come off with the meat. So we're just gonna cut that guy off carefully. Same, you know, find the joint, pop, tip, take out the oyster, sweep, 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 find that joint, don't cut the cartilage off, and then come down so that we don't leave any meat behind. And again, if you do remove, I often cut off a bit of this cartilage bone stuff here. So it's very easy with the tip of your knife just to go in. Clean this up. And I should specify, you don't need to do this with either of the knives I'm using today either. If you have a cheap boning knife, that'll work. If you have a paring knife, that'll work. I often do this with my 135 millimeter petty. Now you have to be more careful because it's an easier knife to chip, but if you are careful, you can do it with that. You can do it with a chef's knife. So I think I learned to do this with like an 8-inch Henkel chef's knife originally. So use the tool that you have, especially if you're looking to save money on groceries. Yes, I have a $300 knife to do this job. Do you need one? No. You can make do with what you have until you have the budget to get a fancy new knife. Okay, so we have the breasts. These are deboned already. We could use these whole. We could, obviously just pan sear them skin side down. Delicious. Cut them in half, deep fry them. I did that last night. We could also cut it up into dice or strips for a stir fry or a soup or whatever we want. We'll leave those for today. That I don't need to show you how to do, I think. There's no tricks. Now we're going to debone the leg, though. I really like a deboned leg because you can like stuff it and roll it. I like to just take a deboned chicken leg and bread it and just make like a breaded chicken cutlet, and you can make that into a sandwich, or I'll slice it up and serve it over rice. It's really good. Chicken parm. I make chicken parm with a deboned leg and then bread it and deep fry it and then put some cheese on it. You don't put the sauce and then bake it because that makes it soggy. But yeah, just a pile of cheese and cheesy, crispy. Oh God, I'm getting hungry. I'm gonna shut up. I'm gonna need to eat a fourth ice cream sandwich. Okay, so we have the leg bone. We have thigh bone, knee joint, leg bone, right? Leg bone's connected to the thigh bone. So we're gonna straighten this out so that it's at less of an angle. We're gonna find this thigh bone. We're gonna find the bottom side of it, and we're gonna press up towards it. We're just gonna slice about maybe half a centimeter deep and couple inches across, and then we're gonna hit that knee joint. Our knife's gonna stop. We're not gonna force it. Then we are going to find that knee joint. You can feel it. It's very cartilagey and bulbous. So we're just gonna cut a little bit in there until we hit the cartilage. That just helps us to see where the bone is. And then we're gonna pull the chicken back, pull the meat and the skin away from the bone, because this bone runs straight down towards that foot there, or that other joint there. And we're just gonna drag the knife straight down across the bone. It's probably gonna slip off to one side, that's fine. Just be careful not to cut all the way through. So now you're starting to open up the leg. You can see all these tendons in here. We're just gonna ignore those. But we're gonna find that bone again. We're gonna start just carefully separating the meat away with the tip of our knife. Again, pressing into the bone so that we scrape all the meat off of it. We're gonna do that on both sides of the bone until it's mostly detached, and then there's gonna be a little membrane keeping it attached there. We're gonna poke the tip of our knife through and under. Be careful because there's that little like wishbone guy, or that little like toothpick guy that's underneath. So we're just gonna make sure we're under that. See the other side of the knife. We're gonna come straight away and then cut straight down once we get to that joint. And then you're left, you got all these tendon ends. That's fine, those cook down, those break up, no big deal. And then we're just gonna make sure that leg section is fully detached from that bone. There we go, we actually got a really clean bone there. Now on the thigh, there's a little bit of meat sitting on top of the bone there, the thigh bone. So we're gonna press the tip of the knife down along the top and just scrape away. And then same deal. Push towards the bone, cut just a couple of millimeters deep. You're better off to make a bunch of small cuts than a couple of big ones because you're gonna be more precise that way. Same deal, we've got a little bit of meat attached on the bottom. Poke the knife through, separate out. You might leave a little cartilage behind on the meat there, that's fine. You can take that off later. Now I got this monstrosity. We've got the bone, or we've got the kneecap, or the knee joint attached with a bunch of meat there still. This is the trickiest part. So we're gonna come in on the inside of the bend there where it bends in, and we're just gonna carefully cut to separate that out. Like so, that's pretty easy, that's just a straight cut. This is kind of where it gets tricky up top, because there's actually another piece of cartilage, there's a kneecap right there. So we're just gonna carefully on the right side cut. You can feel where the hard cartilage is. So we're gonna try to avoid it. And basically, you're just making a bunch of small cuts here. It's hard to give you a tip to do it perfectly. If anybody has a good advice, let me know. But you're just using the tip to carefully slice away. And remember, don't leave that piece of cartilage behind because he's quite big and crunchy. So we're gonna carefully separate the meat from that. And this is the job where this is probably the part of the chicken where you're gonna do the worst job. That's fine, it's not the end of the world. Okay, and then we got a little bit left there. So we just come around from the other side just to detach it fully. If you're not confident, just make a bunch of small cuts until it's done. And there we go. And we left a little bit of meat behind, and that's fine, because that's going to go in our stock pot. Now we have a deboned chicken leg. We can cut this up again for stir fry, or I can make popcorn chicken. You can basically see like a hole where that kneecap contacts the skin there. You can cut it in half, and then you got two sides of the leg. I like to just bread this whole thing, skin on, obviously, in flour and seasoning, and then deep fry that, and then, yeah, make a fried chicken sandwich, do all sorts of stuff with it. It's awesome. Cool. One more time. Find the bones, cut along the underside, or the bottom side of the bones, like so. Separate out as much meat as you can. Come along the top side of the bones, not leaving nothing behind. Separate out the connective tissue on the underside. Boop. Like so. And then just slice in, making small incisions to separate out that knee. Cool. Boneless chicken. The wings are still bone in. I'm not going to show you how to debone them. It's a pain in the ass, and you never want to do it. So that's the end. The end.
One of our viewers asked, speaking of overly fancy but awesome techniques, can you do Jacques Pepin's fully deboned and rolled chicken next? You seen this one?
Can I? Probably not, honestly. Like, I could, but it would be really boring because it would take me a while. I think it's a really fun way. If we're talking about like ridiculous techniques, that's not a useless technique. It is ridiculous, but it's pretty awesome. Yeah, we could do like a brick chicken, like spatchcock it. I don't know. If anybody has any other ways they want to see chicken cut, let me know.
Vote in the comments.
Yeah.
Also, how does everybody like our new neon LED?
Oh yeah, it looks kind of pink. I think it's actually red. I swear.
It looks better in the videos.
Yeah, you'll see that. So next week we've got a video about the top 5 blacksmiths to keep an eye out on. The top 5 up-and-coming blacksmiths in Japan. We got a couple of guys that have been in the game for a while, and we got a few new folks. We're talking about Isamitsu knives and a few others. Really exciting stuff happening right now. So that's with Naoto. And then the week after that, I'll give you guys a little sneak peek. We've been, everybody's talking about AI these days and messing around with us. Messing around with it doesn't really apply to us because we do knives, and Kevin's not going to replace us with a robot anytime soon. But we figured we would ask ChatGPT what it knew about Japanese knives. So we got it to write a couple of scripts for us, and it is pretty ridiculous and pretty fun. We had a lot of fun making that the other day. So you'll get to see the neon in that video. And in two weeks, I believe, we have another viewer suggestion live show. Naoto's Nerdy Power Hour again. We were going to do something else, but when we did the Takeda sharpening 2 weeks ago, everybody asked for how to sharpen Fujiwara knives. People were asking about Denka specifically, so I think I'm going to bring my Denka, which is due for sharpening. Naoto's going to show you how to thin it and sharpen it, and yeah, it'll be really cool. So I'm pretty excited about that one. I got to get my knife sharpened. All right, we doing more chicken right now? Or we're going to move on.
We do have a request for the spatchcocked chicken.
Okay, sounds good.
Do you want to do that at the end?
No, I'll do it right now. Show you guys how to use the cleaver a little bit. So it depends on what kind of like spatchcocking you want to do. Is this like a bone-in spatchcock, or do they want it like fully deboned? Because I can do the fully deboned, but it's going to be a little ugly. And it's probably not going to be the right way to do it. But that's fine. I'm happy to embarrass myself. Yeah, well, thanks everybody that's tuning in today. Hope you guys are learning something. I don't think we have plans the April live show. So if you want to see more knife skills of some kind, let me know what you want to see. I don't think we have any ideas at this moment. I'm going on leave in May for a few months, so I will be around. Yeah, I'll be around in April. We'll do a live show then, and then I think we'll probably just do the Naoto live shows. Then it'll be garage sale in May, so we'll have lots of live shows that month. Yeah, I'm liking the Silverthorn knife. It's really nice. It's my first time using it, but it feels great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Spatchcock had you on.
Okay.
And we got a request for doing a yakitori session down the line, which we were talking about doing. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I'm super down for that. So you can do a spatchcock with, spatchcock is just basically a way to flatten out the chicken so it cooks quicker and more evenly. I really enjoy a whole roasted chicken personally, but if you're doing it on a grill in the summer, it can get a little messy and it can be hard to cook it a bit evenly. One trick if you're roasting chicken is just don't stuff it, or stuff it with like some fresh herbs and some garlic, but leave the cavity mostly empty so that air can circulate through there. But if you are just looking for a way to grill chicken that's super fun, you can do what's called spatchcocking, and you can do this with a chef's knife. You can do it probably more like a German chef's knife. I wouldn't do this with a Gyuto, but you can do it with a cleaver, which is what I'm going to do. You can do it with a hatchet. If you're using a hatchet or like a really obtusely angled cleaver, you're gonna want to be careful, and you might want to have a knife handy. But if you have a really sharp cleaver like this Arcos, you can do it pretty much just with a cleaver. And so the way I like to do it is I basically just cut out the spine, and that's it. So I'm going to find the line where that spine comes down, and I'm going to decide where I want to make my cut. So I'm going to cut these little knobbly guys that come down, like the shoulder blades, I guess, from up here. So I'm going to leave those attached. And yeah, I think so. We'll see. Yeah, so basically with a cleaver, I just cut in on one side of the neck. This cleaver is really sharp, so it just kind of glides through the bone. I'm going to make sure I kind of push the oyster off to one side so that I don't leave it behind. Yeah, and I just kind of slide the cleaver back and forth. If you want, you can whack with the cleaver, but it's a little hard to be precise, and you might go all the way through. So I'm kind of just sliding it because it's quite a sharp cleaver. And then as we get down here, I can feel the legs detached. I'm just going to take the tip of the cleaver and kind of press it through, like so. Crunch. Finish him. And then on the other side, same thing, right? Pull that neck up. Keep your fingers out of the way. These rib bones that attach the breast to the spine are very fine, so you can get through them with just a regular chef's knife or a sharp cleaver like this. They're pretty easy to cut. And then we're going to pop that hip joint out just to save ourselves a little trouble. Make sure we cut on the other side of the oyster so we leave them behind.
Trevor mentioned that kitchen shears work great for removing the backbone too.
Super good for this, yeah. Super, super good. I don't use kitchen shears enough, I should. Yeah, so that's basically the quick and ugly way to do it. You could go in and like separate out these rib bones a little bit, but I just don't really bother. Fatality. There, we got our Mortal Kombat bit in. Yeah, and then you're gonna do this little chiropractor move, because the breast is kind of, it won't sit flat, and the whole kind of advantage of this is the whole thing sits flat on the grill and contacts evenly. So you just put the heel of your palm on it, and you just give it that chiropractor move, and then it kind of breaks the keel bone open. And then it just, yeah, you can season. I would personally season both sides liberally, let it sit overnight and marinate a bit, and then just throw this bad boy on the grill like that. And yeah, I grill both sides. I oil it very well, and then you can spritz it with apple cider vinegar, or you can, I'll do like a barbecue based usually, like just kind of a wet barbecue sauce, and just like baste it for a while and do it kind of low and slow. And that is what I want to eat right now. Yeah, because just thinking about that's making me hungry.
Do you want another ice cream?
No, I want a barbecued chicken.
Julian is asking, what's the hole in the cleaver actually for?
Oh, that's to hang it up. Just put it if you got a pegboard wall like this, you just slip it on there. I didn't touch the wall, don't worry. It's not chicken on the wall. Yeah, if you, like a lot of traditional butcher shops would have hooks, or even traditional kitchens would often have like a bar over the station, and there you could hang up your meat hook, your knife, your, I don't know, gloves maybe, I don't know. But yeah, just to hang it.
Is that the Arcos 160 or 180?
Oh, 180. I would not go smaller than this. Yeah, I would not get the 160, honestly. It's cute, but it's not very useful. Yeah, you could use it, but like anything bigger than a chicken, and it's going to be too small. So if you ever want to cut like a turkey, for example, the knife's just going to get lost in it. So I love this knife, but I'm actually probably going to give it to somebody and get myself a bigger one. I think the Arcos 220, is that the big black guy? Like the big black handle and the shiny blade?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think I'm going to get that one. Because that's like more of a chopper. I've gone through like pork rib bones with this, and it was fine, but it struggled. And so I want to be able to do some bigger stuff. Okay. Any other questions?
No, I think we're all caught up.
Okay. Well, can you do me a favor and grab the beef from the fridge, please? Just in a grocery bag.
Okay.
So next we're gonna get into some beef. I've got a chuck or a shoulder roast, and they're really cheap. Steaks are expensive, obviously, especially beef steaks. And so one way you can save money is by cutting your own steaks. It's very easy, and it's just kind of a no-brainer. It's one of those things that once you realize how quick and easy it is, you kind of wonder why you haven't done it all along. They may not be quite as pretty as what you're going to get in the butcher shop, but they're going to be a lot cheaper. Especially if you have a Costco membership, you can get like a whole sirloin, a whole tenderloin, or a rib roast, and you can cut that up into steaks, and it's awesome. I've got a beef blade roast for a couple reasons. Number one, it's cheap. Number two, it still grills relatively well. So the blade is a term that's often used for like the shoulder area, and you can get beef blade or pork blade steaks, and both, in my opinion, have more flavor than certain other steaks. Certainly more than tenderloin, because the muscle does more work, so it's got more flavor. They are tougher, but they're not, I don't find them tough and chewy. It's more toughness, like a little more toothiness, a little more firmness to the meat, which I prefer, honestly. I'm not personally a fan of tenderloin. If it's raw and chopped up in tartare, I love it. If you put a tenderloin in front of me, I'm not going to complain. But given the choice, I would buy other cuts. And so chuck is like a tenth of the price, and maybe not that cheap, but it's cheap. This steak was $19 at Superstore, and it's awesome, and it makes for a good roast as well. I find you have to cook it a little more and rest it a little more. You can also marinate too if you want to tenderize it a little further. Personal preference, but you can also just salt and pepper it and grill it, and then yeah, just cook it a little more medium well even, and then rest it lots, and it'll be delicious.
Jake asked, can you use a chukabocho to do a chicken?
Yeah, absolutely. We got a video coming out in 3 weeks-ish, 2.5 weeks, where Colin does that. The legendary Martin Yan, I don't think we have his book out right now, but Martin Yan, the patron saint of Chinese cleavers, it was a awesome Chinese TV chef back in the day, and so he's famous for taking a chicken apart in anywhere between like 20 and 30 seconds. And yeah, I mean, you can use any knife to debone a chicken pretty much. It's going to be easier for a lot of people to do it with a smaller knife, and I still do it with a smaller knife because it's just easier. But you can absolutely do it with a cleaver. Colin works in the Calgary store, does it with a cleaver all the time. He's a real cleaver nut.
I think that's in the cleaver video we have, right?
Yeah, it might be. I'm not sure. We put out a cleaver comparison video last week. Go watch it and tell me if he does a chicken in it.
Julian also asked, do you recommend the bleach sponge as a functional way to clean the board after poultry? I feel like maybe I'm babying my wood board too much.
Yeah, you can be a little hard on wooden boards. I think a light bleaching is going to be fine. Just never soak them. I'll be honest, I'm a little fast and loose with food safety at home, not when I worked in a restaurant, but I just don't worry about it too much. I wash my board with soap and water, and I rinse it with relatively hot water, not scalding hot, and it's fine. But if you are more careful than me, you could do a light bleaching. Find out how long the bleach needs to sit to kill bacteria, and then I would rinse and dry it as soon as possible. If bleach sits on there for too long, it's going to dry out your board, it's going to bleach out your board, it's just going to be kind of sad. So you want to get some water to rinse it off, or you could even neutralize it with vinegar. That'll neutralize the base. Yeah, I know. You know what I have done before I get into it is I've cleaned with a mixture of, so you spray rubbing alcohol and then you spray vinegar. And look to make sure I've got that correct, but I believe it's rubbing alcohol. And that combination kills everything. And so I did that when I was butchering my pig. So, you got a beautiful roast. Obviously, we could cook it like a roast. But if we wanted to cut a couple of blade steaks here, somebody was asking on Instagram how you determine the thickness of steaks. And that, the answer is, how thick of a steak do you like? That's how thick you should cut it. If it's a blade, because it's a bit of a tougher cut, I'm going to cook it longer. I'm not going to cut it too thin because then it's going to overcook. And I'm not going to cut it super thick because I do need to cook it through more or less. If I cut it, we've also seen those like crazy ribeye steaks. It's basically like a miniature roast. They're awesome, but you don't need to cook that thing all the way through. This guy you need to cook, you at least need to warm it all the way through. So I'm going to cut mine like a bit over an inch. It's been in the fridge. We just pulled it out of the fridge, and I find when meat's colder, it's a lot easier to cut. So keep your meat refrigerated and just pull it out right before you're about to cut it. And so if I was going to cut a steak off the end here, this guy's already been tied up by the butcher, which is very handy because some of these muscle groups that aren't really traditionally cut into steaks, they can be a little bit loose. Like I know this guy's got a bit of a flap over here that's going to fall off if I'm not careful. So I'm going to leave the twine on. I'm not going to take that off and then cut steaks because they'll be very messy steaks. The twine also keeps the meat kind of like tight, and if the meat isn't like tightened up like that, your steaks are going to be a little sloppy and a little badly angled. And I'm already bad at cutting steaks, so I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to guide right between these two pieces of twine here. I've got a long blade for making long cuts, because what we don't want to do when we're cutting a steak is saw back and forth a whole bunch. We want to make as few cuts as possible. So I'm going to start right in the middle, the heel of my knife. Actually, I'm going to start on the tip of the knife, and I'm just going to push through gently, like so, get about halfway through, and then just pull back, dragging the tip of my knife across the cutting board. There we go. We have a somewhat even, nice looking steak there. Beautiful. It's a blade steak. Yeah, I would marinate that, and then I grill it, cook it medium, and rest it for 20 minutes. Easy peasy, right? Let's do it one more time. Right between the twine. Want to make sure we're relatively in line with our last cut so we're not getting like wedge steaks. I've cut steaks that look like a doorstop before, and they're fine, but they're overcooked on one side and undercooked on the other. So we're just going to make sure that twine's out of the way there. We're going to cut tip first till we get to the heel of the knife, and then kind of grip over top, just hold it in place, and pull back, bring the tip of the knife, pull the tip of the knife straight down so it completes the cut. There we go. Beautiful. Look at that. It's a nice steak.
What happens if you slice them too thin?
They're just going to cook faster. So if you like your steak medium well or well, do that, right? I don't see why not. They could dry out more. I don't know what the science would be behind that, but I think they would probably dry out a little more easily. Yeah. Say we don't want steaks, though. Say we want to turn this into stir-fry meat or stewing meat. Personally, I would stew this whole as a pot roast, and that would be awesome. But if we don't want to do that, and we want to maybe cook it a little more quickly, and we want to take out some of the connective tissue, or you want to, for God forbid, take out some of the fat for some strange reason, we could do that. So we're going to take some of the twine off here. We're turning all this into tacos on the weekend. We're going to do Taco Tuesday at the office on on Tuesday next week. I'm very excited for it. Just excited to braise beef. Yeah, okay, so this is a technique called seam butchering, and it's not something I've done a lot of, but when you get a larger cut like this is how you kind of separate out muscle groups, is you just find these like natural seams in the meat where fat or connective tissue creates a dividing line, and you basically just follow those to separate out the different muscle groups. And so it's really easy, just gentle dragging cuts does the trick. Yeah, easy peasy. But if you want to get some of this stuff off here, I would not do this with a Sujihiki. I would grab a boning knife, or if you don't have one, a paring knife. You want something that's got some length. You want something that's like kind of 4 inches, but you don't want something that's super tall like a chef's knife. So, and then you just kind of dig the tip of the knife in. Start on the easy part here. Dig it in right under the fat, or usually more often than not, it's like silver skin. And you just cut away from you like so, and then you bring the knife back and cut like that. And this stuff is really great to throw into your stock. So if I was working in a restaurant or a butcher shop, I'd be more careful about how much meat I'm taking off as I'm doing this. But if I'm doing this at home, I don't sweat it too hard, because it's all going to end up in my freezer bag where I keep all my meat scraps, and that's going to end up in my stock. So yeah, through, away, come back. Again, if you leave a little bit of meat behind, if this is for home cooking, it's not a big deal. You know, that was the worst part. I watched the show Dexter recently. I never watched it when it was coming out. Awesome show. I really liked the show. But him and his sister have this like tradition where they drink beer and eat steaks. And it drove me up the wall, because they get these like 2 beautiful strip loins with like this nice line of fat along the top. And then before they fry them, they always cut the fat off. Like you see him with his like chef's knife, like cutting the fat off the steak. And I'm just like I know this is like the early 2000s and like being skinny was hot and like all this diet bullshit, but I'm just like, oh my God, this is like atrocious. It just made me sad. That's my rant of the week. Yeah, so there we go. That, if you did want something with less fat, or more likely less silver skin, that is basically how you would trim it up. You could use a Sujihiki, but it's just your hand's way back here. Like, I'll show you on the camera. Your hand's way back here, so you have less control. But you can do it. Just be careful. It's tough with a taller knife. Like a chef's blade, it's much easier to take off more meat. And so you generally want to use a longer, skinnier blade for this. If you got like one of those Henkel's knife blocks for your weddings that comes with like 16 different knives, and you only use 2 of them, grab the boning knife. My dad got one of those, and he uses the boning knife in that kit for this kind of stuff now. Meat! Excited to turn these into tacos. Yeah, so there we go. That's the silver skin. This is the kind of stuff you want to remove on like beef and lamb, because it's awful. It'll never break down. If you're doing like a really slow braise, don't need to worry about it too much. But if you're doing like a stir fry or grilling a steak, this is the stuff that's going to be really unpleasant. And you're just going to chew it and chew it and chew it and chew it, and your teeth are never going to get through it. So, all right, we got any questions or anything? I'm going to stop because we're braising this, and so I actually want to leave all this stuff on here because it's flavor.
Jake was asking, do you season your steaks with MSG?
Oh, I've been meaning to buy MSG. So I was raised to think that MSG was evil, and then David Chang enlightened me. And so I want to, because, food made with MSG is really delicious. I think there's still a part of my brain that, feels like MSG is like a cheat code. It's like, you want to beat the video game without having to use the cheat codes. But also it makes food delicious, so why wouldn't you? Like, I wouldn't cook a steak without salt. That would be insane. So why would I cook it? Yeah, I don't know. No, I haven't tried it.
We regularly do this at home.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. My husband and I, we always do a 24-hour dry brine, and then we do a reverse sear.
I'm just going to go dump the water while you talk.
Yeah, do it up. you guys can look at nothing while I talk about my steaks. But yeah, normally we do a 24-hour dry brine, and then we watch a whole lot of Guga Foods, as a lot of you do as well. So usually we end up like trying a couple of the things that he does, and MSG as part of the season was one of the things that we do, and it turned out so good that we do it just about every time that we cook steaks now. What about you, Jake? Are you into the MSG? Your turns.
The overnight salting on steaks is definitely the clutch move. Yeah, because it denatures the protein on the surface, so it helps the steak sear better, and obviously it helps the salt get its way into the meat a little more. Okay, any other questions?
No, we're all caught up.
A little light on the questions today, but that's okay. Hopefully people are learning. I don't know if anybody's trying to butcher along. I hope nobody tried to. But yeah, thanks everybody that's tuned in. This has been a lot of fun so far. I got a leg trout that I'm going to do a bad job of filleting. And then if you do have more questions, we'll get to those, and then we'll be done for the day. Does anybody have a suggestion of what we should do next month in April? We're in Canada, so it might be a little cold to do Conroe. If it isn't, if it's warm, we should totally do some Conroe. But if not, then yeah, I don't know. I actually haven't had any ideas yet. Okay. All right, we got our board wiped off there. There we go. So, fish. You know, if you like to fish, that's obviously one reason why you might want to take apart your own fish. I caught this just the other day. You know, it just came out of the lake with this beautiful packaging on it.
God bless Mother Nature.
God bless Mother Nature. Yeah. So, okay. I'm curious how smelly this guy's going to be. So this was kind of just bought on a whim. We weren't sure if we were going to do fish today, but this guy was $5.65. So we'll see how it smells when we crack open this bag here. It's not, you know, it's not terrible. So, yeah, he's a little slimy. One of the trickiest things about butchering your own fish is how slippery they can be. Depending on the fish, obviously. Lake fish tend to be fairly slippery. If you ever had the good fortune of fishing in northern Saskatchewan, you'll have caught a trout that is just the most lubricated creature you've ever set your hands upon. It's unbelievable how slippery they are. This guy's not too bad. He's not very fresh looking. You can see the color's not bright. It's very kind of pale, you know. So I think we should probably cook this guy tonight. But, yeah. It also doesn't smell rank, so that's good. Yeah, all right. Yeah, smells like a trout. Smells like a slightly old trout. It was $6, so I'm not too worried about it. Okay, so fish, if you're not catching it yourself, you don't have to worry about any internal organs, which is pretty much always the case for, except for the bits that they left behind, but that's okay. That's pretty much always the case for fish you buy from the store, or animals you buy from the store in general. With fish, we have the head up here. We typically have a collarbone, and I should say, this is a round fish, not a flat fish. Flat fish have 4 sides, they're bottom feeders. This is a round fish, and that's what we're going to do today. So it's got 1 fillet on either side for a total of 2. So round fish, they have this collarbone here. You typically have a little fin over here, not much along the belly. You've got a little dorsal fin over on the back here, and then this little nub that this guy has here. And then you've got a fin up top like this guy. God, he's slimy. This is not a fresh fish. And then you've got the rib cage in here. So much like the chicken, you've got that kind of like chest cavity area with all those little rib bones. You've also got the backbone. So you've got kind of like a spine that runs along the middle here, basically in line with this line here. And then you've got a dorsal ridge that goes up along the top. I can't remember if that's the right name, but you got a little ridge that goes up along the top there. So I'm going to do the Japanese way of taking fish apart because it's the way that's worked best for me. Fish, for whatever reason, I find way harder to butcher than land animals, and I don't know why, but I've had some practice, so hopefully I won't do too poorly today. A lot of people in the West like a long, flexible blade like this. That's what I'm going to use. I actually find a Japanese deba, a little easier. It's totally different. It's tall, it's shorter, it's really thick, and it's a completely different knife. And so I'm going to use the Japanese style of taking apart a trout with the Western style fillet knife, but it's worked for me in the past, so we'll see. So I like to start by separating out basically the head. All right, so we're going to come in, we're going to be cautious of this collar here, because we don't want to run our knife into it, and watch out for this guy. But we're not going to cut straight down because there's some meat hiding in behind here. So we're going to basically just sever this thin bit here, and then we're going to come in towards the head at about a 45-degree angle, and then we're leaving behind all that nice meat there. I say nice, it's not, but if this were a fresh fish, it would be. Cool. Then we're going to flip the knife, or flip the fish. It's kind of at like I like to have it at about a 45, because what I'm going to try to do is run the blade along this dorsal ridge here and separate all that meat out. So I dig the tip of my knife in, and I just run it. Oh, this guy's a little tough. Basically, there we go. Poke your knife in and try to find where that dorsal ridge is. You can even stick your fingers in there. Be careful when you're feeling a fish because the bones can actually end up pretty sharp. And I've cut myself pretty badly on fish bones before. But I'm going to put my hand on top so it's not in the way. And I'm just going to bring the tip of my knife in towards the spine there. Basically, I'm just running it all the way along the back of the trout like so. We want to open this guy up here. And then you get in with the tip. Just cut in a little closer. How's it going, Mike?
It's a good looking trout.
Yeah, right? It's the palest trout I've ever seen. Yeah. I think I cut on the other side of the dorsal ridge. That's okay.
Are we turning this all into tacos next week?
I don't think we're going to turn the trout into tacos.
You wouldn't eat a trout taco?
I mean, I would eat a fresh trout taco.
I would, without a trout.
Jesus Christ. I'm gonna, so I separated this side off the dorsal ridge there. I'm going to come in and basically do the same thing just along this little section here. I actually find it a little easier to come in from the inside. And then I basically pull up on the spine side and the belly side, and I'm just going to separate these ribs out from that spine. And with a smaller fish like this, you should be able to get in with the tip of a tougher knife, especially a deba, and just basically break that rib connection there. How are we doing?
Looking good.
I'm doing an awful job of this, so I deserve any vitriol in the comments. There we go. Cool, and then if there's a little bit of connective tissue left, we can basically lift up both sides and get in and then just bring our knife all the way down on both sides. Oh God, this, ugh. This trout's awful. And you did an okay job, which I didn't totally mangle it. If you did leave a little bit of spine on the top, as I did, you can get in with your knife and just slip it under there and just trim that bit off. And then on the belly side, same thing. So we're just gonna, basically we've got this like little bit of rib bone there that kind of flares outwards. So we're just gonna take the tip of our knife and follow along basically just scooping under those ribs to make a little incision. And then we're gonna bring our knife up and just gently press up towards the ribs, kind of guiding it with our hand on the other side of the rib cage there. There we go. And that's basically how you do it, except better. And I partially blame the fish because this guy's falling apart in my hands, but if you practice, you'll also be a lot better than me. I do it this way because the technique we were taught in culinary school was a lot more difficult than this, and so I've kind of avoided that technique. But yeah, if you have a better way that you suggest, let me know. And then on the other side here, you can kind of leave it, I like to leave it this way up, just separate out the back bone there, the dorsal ridge. And then, same with the spine, you can kind of hear the tip of your knife clicking along the spine there. Oh my God, this poor fish. I feel bad for this guy. It's just.
Is this supposed to be yellow?
Not really. If he kind of feels like he's been in and out of the freezer about 10 times. Yeah. It's just, this is not the finest fish that Canada has to offer. Oof, yeah, this is difficult. Anyways, you know, figured we'd end the show on a high note by butchering a rotten fish. Cool. And then on the other side, you can just disconnect the head pretty simply.
Loblaws keeps handing us bangers after bangers.
Right? You know what? They might be making Canadians poor, but at least they gave us a good beef blade roast. That chicken was decent too. But yeah, oh yeah, remember the onions we got from them? Oh, those are awful. Now the one thing you should know about fish, depending on the type of fish, they're gonna have bones that basically go right into the flesh like this, and they're awful to eat because they get stuck in your throat, and yeah, they're just unpleasant. So you'll want to get in there with a pair of fish tweezers. You can run your finger kind of against the grain there, and the tips will pop up. You get in there with your fish tweezers, and you can, depending on the quality of the fish, this guy, they're sliding right out, but you want to go in and pick all of those out. Some people will go in and like cut that whole section out, but it's kind of a waste. If you're doing if you're doing pike, you have to do that. The pike are the ones I was referring to that are really slippery, but they have like these Y bones that go in a Y shape, and they're impossible to pull out. So those you kind of just have to cut them out, or you can can them and they'll break down completely. Yeah. Woo! All right, question time. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. If you want to take apart some beef or some chicken, you should do it the way I do it. If you want to take apart a fish, go watch another video on that. And yeah, I hope you guys learned a thing or two today. If you do have more questions, we still got some more time. So feel free to pop those in the comments and we'll get to them. I mentioned it earlier, but if you're in Calgary, Alberta, we have a brisket smoking workshop that we are doing in collaboration with Prairie Dog Brewing. So the class is about 5 hours long. It's $375, but you walk away with a $200 slicing knife from Sakai Takayuki, which you can also upgrade if you want to something fancier. We'll bring some other knives for people to trade in for. You also walk away with a fully smoked brisket worth about $200, as well as getting a bunch of instruction. We'll do some knife skills instructions. You'll learn how to trim and smoke a brisket properly. And you get lunch and a beverage as well. And if you want to go with a spouse or a friend or something, you can book a twofer for an extra $75, and that gets you an extra spot and an extra lunch and drink. So it's a really fun class. It's in Calgary, and the spots are booking up fast. The first one sold out in 2 days, and so we had to book another one because people were asking about it. And who knows, maybe there'll be more. We've also got some beautiful new spoons. They're designed as coffee tasting spoons, but they're just great general tasting and cooking spoons. From Ume Shiso, those are up on the website now. And we have some great new videos coming out. So in 2 weeks, we're going to be doing Naoto's Nerdy Power Hour, sharpening Fujiwara knives. And next week, we've got our weekly video talking about the top 5 Japanese blacksmiths to watch this year. All guys doing really exciting, cool stuff. So some cool behind the scenes stuff there. And then in 2 weeks, we've got a video where we get ChatGPT to tell us what it knows about Japanese knives. And man, was it interesting. So hope you guys stay tuned for that. It'll be pretty fun.
Jake was wondering, does Nathan recommend a certain degree of angle of sharpness for a deba?
Degree of angle of sharpness. Yeah, so a deba's single bevel knife is sharpened on the bevel traditionally. Usually single bevel knives, you just sharpen them on the bevel and then give them a little more of an angle. But a deba, you'd want to increase that angle probably to like 20 degrees for a secondary edge. You probably also want to polish it on a rougher stone, like a 2000 grit, for the final edge, as opposed to going all the way up to like 8 or 10,000 grit. Naoto has a really good deba, or a single bevel sharpening video from a few weeks ago, where at the end he talks about some tips for sharpening debas. So you could check that out. I don't know. You got any others, Sky? Sky's sharpened a lot more of them than I have.
Yeah, I think with a deba, just like making sure you're not going too ham on the polish, because it's not going to end up mattering in the long run.
Yeah, it's a beater.
It's meant to be like a beefy knife, so you can really max out at about 1,000, 2,000 grit.
Yeah, and if your edge is too fine, it also won't bite into fish skin well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well,
Man,
thanks.
that just reminded me. I was talking about pike being a really slippery fish. They have really tough skin.
Yeah.
So we had a family reunion in Saskatchewan, and I had my like nice Norwegian fish knife that I was butchering the pike with, and my like distant cousin from the States. I think they're from Kansas actually. He rolls up and he's got a car battery and he's got a reciprocating saw that he attaches to the car battery. Yeah, and it was a monster, and that's how he fillets his pike. So, yeah. They look similar in the end to the trout that I did today. It's pretty rough.
America.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Happy weekend.